One of my favorite things is definitely robotic combat. Although in the late 90s and early 2000s, that was definitely easier said than done because, you know, there was Robot Wars and there was Battlebots. But Robot Wars was very limited to me, considering only maybe 2 of the series got onto channels that I actually had on my limited cable package, since I didn't have the BBC or anything. And Battlebots only lasted for about 3 years when it was on Comedy Central, although the Comedy Central era was classic. Now between like 2002-ish, whenever it got canceled on Comedy Central, and 2015 when it came back on ABC, it was very limited. Like, sure, there were some Battlebot competitions in between, but I just didn't get a chance to see them because they weren't televised. But, you know, I'm rambling on. Anyways, Robot Wars was a pretty great series, and unfortunately it was recently canceled, which is kind of upsetting. I hope it does come back one day, because that was a cool series, and I loved the house robots. So, in its memory, we're going to take a look at some Robot Wars games for portable game systems. Now, Robot Wars did have a handful of games. However, there is one on the PS2 and one on the Xbox that I won't be looking at in this episode due to the fact that they were both PAL only, and playing PAL only disc games on an NTSC system is kind of a pain to do, and I don't feel like jumping through the hoops to be able to play those. So maybe I'll do a follow-up to this episode one day with those titles. However, the first game I'm going to take a look at is Robot Wars Metal Mayhem. Now, Robot Wars Metal Mayhem was released in 2000 for the Game Boy Color, making it the first video game to be based on Robot Wars. As you can imagine, it is a PAL-only release, but thank goodness that the Game Boy line is region-free. Thank goodness. Now, to start off, there's 4 options outside of the Restore Game and Options, which obviously you should know what they are, I'm sure you do. The first one is Robot Workshop, which is a part where you construct your robot. It's very bare bones and simple, but it's nice that it's there. Pretty much just select the robot build type and its weapon, and you're built a robot. I can forgive the lack of customization due to the timing of this game. It's completely understandable that a Game Boy Color game like this wouldn't be super customizable. I also like the names the owner of the game prior to me gave their robots. I'm not sure if I should use Cheese Greeter or Billy Whiz. All his robots are basically identical though. Not that there's many options to begin with. The next item you can select is the Trials option, which as you can imagine are trials. Yeah. First one is called Skittles. Yeah, Skittles. Where you just knock over barrels and don't get killed by pits or house robots. The graphical style is very simplistic and the controls leave a little bit to be desired, but for the Game Boy Color it performs fair enough. In addition to choosing great robots like Billy Whiz, you can also choose a handful of robots from the competition that were around at the time of the game's release, including Pussycat and Panic Attack. That's pretty cool. Unfortunately, the control makes this challenge a little tough, and I'll just never beat Billy Whiz this time, I guess. Now, the second trial in question is a sumo match, which you can just choose any robot to go against. It's painfully simple. I mean, it's just literally a sumo match between 2 robots. Just what you'd imagine. I like that when you win, you literally just get a message saying, "You won." What an accomplishment. Slalom and Gauntlet are the other two events, and they're just basically the same idea. Get from point A to point B. You avoid fire hazards and that oddly damage your robot a lot more than fire normally should, as well as the house robots. They're okay, but you know, I want to go to where the franchise truly shines, the robot combat. The war zone is basically what I gather to be, I guess, the competition sort of deal. I should also add that flippers are pretty weak in this game, and they can't even flip the opponents as far as I saw in my playthrough of this game. So what's even the point? Pussycat didn't fare much better, and the blade looked like it was doing more of a thrusting action than a spinning one. Yeah. The hit detection's also a little weird. The game's honestly not very good, but it's the only game on the list that's for the Game Boy Color, so I guess you gotta start somewhere, plus goodness knows that the Game Boy Color has lots of shovelware on it. The next game I'm going to talk about is Robot Wars Advanced Destruction, and if the name wasn't a dead giveaway, the game is for the Game Boy Advance. It came out in 2001, and oddly enough, this title did see a North American release. I mean, I guess it makes sense because this was at the height of the early 2000s robot combat hype, and Robot Wars was being aired on more accessible American channels. But I mean, I kind of wish I had looked into it before I imported an NTSC Game Boy Advance game from Poland. Not to mention, to add insult to injury, I found it at a local game store I go to frequently right after it came in the mail. Way to go, Pory. Now, Advanced Destruction is a big step up from its predecessor. Obviously, because it's on a more advanced system, no pun intended. Like the first one, you build your robot here, but it's a lot more advanced, again, no pun intended, than Metal Mayhem. I mean, not by that much, but it definitely shows. The game doesn't have any of the trials, which I'm honestly pretty okay with, just battles this time around. The first option you're greeted with is Quick Start, just in case you wanted to hop into an entirely random battle where the game selects you and your opponent's robots. Which is okay for a quick pick-up and play experience. I'm definitely into that. Like the previous game, you can select a robot from the competition in addition to your own design. Honestly, no one can take down The controls are pretty basic, just like every other game on the list. A and B accelerate and reverse respectively, and the L and R buttons activate any weaponry your machine may have. It's not what I'd consider the most ideal way to control a game like this, but it gets the job done, it works. Honestly, the weaponry in this game seems to do little to no damage at all. Like, sure, a flipper could potentially flip you, but you can just self-right even if your robot can't actually do that with its design, but just by pressing the select button, which, by the way, is kind of a random button to press to self-right your robot. There's also house robots, but they don't even really seem to do that much in terms of damage to the opponent. The first one I'm going to look at is the Vengeance Battle, where you just select a robot to fight one time. It's basically Quick Start, but you can choose who you are and who your opponent is. That's pretty good for a nice pick-up and play experience, just like Quick Start. I appreciate that. The next mode I'm going to look at is Championship. Yeah, as you can imagine, that's the Championship mode. You start off with a three-way rumble, and I'm totally dominating this opponent. Just like destroying it, and for some reason, Mortis is the winner. Okay. Thankfully, I still move on and can just take down everyone else. This is incredibly fast. It's a 7-battle bracket, but you can literally clear the game in less than 10 minutes if you know what you're doing. Like before I'd mentioned, there's honestly not much damage inflicted with your weapon, and the only effective way to really take out your opponent is to either pin them against a saw or knock them into a pit. Sometimes they'll literally just stay by the saw and get damaged. Yeah, I totally bet that Hypnodisc's driver would just sit there and let their robot get destroyed. After reigning victorious, you simply just get a message saying, "You have won the Robot Wars World Championship," with an image of the Robot Wars trophy. guess it's better than you won. The last mode is Robot Mayhem, which is just you playing as a single individual robot, and you have to beat 21 robots in a row. And that's without being KO'd once. I'm not kidding you when I say this is tough. I got to about 12 robots or so before I got knocked out, because inevitably you're going to take damage in this. The game overall is decent enough, and it looks nice. It doesn't fill my fix, unfortunately, but it's okay. There's also a multiplayer mode which allows up to 4 players, but realistically I'm probably not going to find that many people with this game, with Game Boy Advances, who are willing to actually play this multiplayer. Maybe one day. The third and last Robot Wars game I'm going to talk about in this episode is Robot Wars Extreme Destruction, also for the Game Boy Advance. We're going from Advance to Extreme in this. A game that, with the same exact title, was also released on the Xbox and the PC, but it's a completely different game, and as I stated earlier, I don't have the ability to play PAL-only games on my Xbox right now, so I won't be looking at this in this episode. Like Metal Mayhem, this one was only released in PAL regions as well. Now let's take a look. Now to start, this game also has the quick start mode like Advanced Destruction did, but let's look at the actual game because I already went over what quick start is. I have to be honest, for a Game Boy Advance game, this looks really good. It reminds me kind of a Super FX game, sorta. How's it control? Well, it controls decent enough. You press up to go forward, which feels nicer than the last game, at least in my opinion. This one also has the building feature, obviously, and it's a step up from the previous game. It has more options, and you can even unlock more as you complete battles and whatnot. There's also a gauntlet mode, which is an umbrella term for all the non-combat events, similar to how Metal Mayhem has them. Slalom, Skittles, and Sumo all return, although they all feel less fun than the Game Boy Color counterpart. Not that they were particularly enjoyable in themselves, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel as fun in this game, I guess. Added on are 3 other events. There's the long jump, which just literally launches your robot in the air. Okay. There's the dump, which you just push metal objects into the pits. And there's drop zone, which is just kind of a whack-a-mole thing, but it's not fun at all due to the fact that a game like that does not work with a robot combat game where you're driving a robot around. It just doesn't work. You also have the bash and dash, which is just pick one robot to play as and one to fight for a quick fight, which was also in the previous game as well. It's simple enough. Nice pick up and play. This one also has Mayhem mode, but it's just a 4-bot rumble as opposed to beating 21 robots straight. A lot easier, thank goodness. I should also add that the hit detection in this game is kinda iffy. Like in Advanced Destruction, it never feels like you do much damage with your weapon, but dang, it is so satisfying when you play as a flipper like Firestorm and launch your opponent in the air, even if it ultimately doesn't do much. I feel like your ability to push a fellow robot is just really difficult in this. They all either bounce around or they go right over you if you're a wedge. There's pits you can activate, and that's basically how I defeated all my opponents. The camera angles are also kind of weird, and when you turn fast, I swear it makes me nauseous sometimes. The tournament is more of the same. There's just 4 matches to win in this, but with the issues I mentioned above, it's a little easier said than done. But even then, it's a pretty fast process, but at least there's bronze, silver, and gold cups you can get in this game, so there's more replayability, and as you go, you unlock more robots and parts for the building aspect. It's definitely a very visually impressive game for being on the little old Game Boy Advance, but the gameplay just isn't as nice. It is the best of the 3 Robot Wars games I've talked about in this episode, though, so if you had to get any of the 3, I would recommend this one. Now, I did enjoy Robot Wars, even if my time with it was limited, but the series that really had the spot in my heart was definitely Battlebots. In the early 2000s, a game based on this series was announced for the PS2 and GameCube, and I was stoked. I just couldn't believe it. I was anxiously waiting it, but unfortunately, it just seems that it got the axe once the Convict Central run was cancelled. Although there is supposedly a near-finished prototype of the game floating out there. Man, I would love to have one of those. However, Battlebots did see 2 Game Boy Advance games released, Design and Destroy and Beyond the Battle Box, although there's pretty much the same exact game, just with slight differences in like the menus and audio and maybe a bug fix here or there. Battlebots Beyond the Battle Box was released in 2002. The Design and Destroy version came out a year later, and honestly, this release just kind of snuck up on me, considering how excited I was for the console version that never came to be. This game is an isometric style game, and much like the Robot Wars games, it definitely looks pretty nice for the system it came on. You can play on either simulation or arcade mode. Arcade mode basically means the arena will occasionally spawn power-ups, and CPU robots that cannot self-right and aren't invertible can self-right. Although, whatever robot you end up building, no matter what the design is, you can always self-right, even if it doesn't make sense. The main mode in the game is tournament mode, where you must defeat 4 robots from the series, each in a weight class with a robot you built. It lets you pick the chassis, which gives you a decent amount of choices in each class, as well as wheels, motors, and of course weapons and armor. The weapons choice is pretty nice too, and the robots overall, while not very customizable, but that kind of makes sense though, because I feel like that would be really hard to program in, and it would make the game too complicated. But overall, this many options definitely makes it superior to the other 3 games I talked about in this video, so good on them. You start each fight, and you can customize the time in the game, whether it's a 3-minute battle, 2-minute battle, or if it's infinite time where you just fight to the death. Battlebox is presented very nicely in here, and there's even more arenas that I'll get into in a little bit. The box looks great, as well as the robots from the show. Unfortunately, the robots you build always look really generic, and it seems like no matter what armor you wind up using, it just looks like a bare chassis, which is kind of silly, but whatever. It's fine, because the game controls fine. This is my ideal way of wanting to control a game like this. The lightweights in this game are generally robots that I would expect to be in this game. Toe Crusher and Mouser Mecha Catbat were definitely very popular at the time, and Backlash and Ziggo both won golden nuts in the series, so this entirely makes sense. Each battle you win also earns you some money, which can be used towards repairs, which you do in between each battle. You can go to the pit in between each one and fix whatever's damaged, or if you so desire, swap out weapons or armor or something. After you beat all 4 robots, you move on to the middleweight bracket, and then after that, heavyweight and super heavyweight, obviously. These 4 robots generally make sense too. Complete Control is just iconic, and it's the only robot that's in this game that actually made it to the ABC reboot. I should also add that Complete Control is one of the hardest opponents you'll face in this game, at least until a super heavyweight one that I'll get into a little later. Dead Blow is another obvious choice due to its popularity. Plus, it was made by that one guy who was on Mythbusters. Sunshine Lollybot is kind of questionable. Although it had one televised appearance, at least that one televised appearance is one of the most iconic fights in the Convict Central run of Battlebots. Hazard, well, yeah, that's obvious. That's the best middleweight from that series. It only had 1 loss in its 4 seasons that it competed in, so obviously that's going to be in the game. Plus, Hazard just rules. Now, obviously, after you become the 2nd robot ever to beat Hazard, you move on to the heavyweight division, where these robots are just as iconic. You have Tazbot, Overkill, and Biohazard, all classic robots. And for some reason, El Diablo Grande. And while the Grande version of El Diablo isn't exactly the most popular robot in the world, the original El Diablo was, and I'm guessing since the middleweight slots were all taken, and Grande has a lifter as well, making it more unique. than just a typical drum spinner. They just decided to go with that. So I definitely get it. And it's cool to fight all these classic robots, and to be able to defeat Biohazard is just so satisfying. Last but certainly not least is the Super Heavyweight division, where the robot roster is Toro, Minion, and Dissector, who all had championships under their belt, and they're all pretty great robots. And for some reason, Jaws of Death, which I honestly don't understand at all, because in its 3 seasons it only had 3 wins, and one of which was by forfeit, and it never even had a televised fight on the TV series. I guess the answer to that is it looks cool. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Jaws of Death looks pretty cool. Jaws of Death and Minion are pushovers, though, especially if you're playing on simulation mode, since neither of them can self-right. After them is Dissector, which is always a cool robot in the series. Dissector is a tough one since it immediately self-rights and it's all up in your face. Definitely the hardest robot in this game to fight, in my opinion at least. Toro is the final boss, if you will. He's pretty modest after Dissector, but it's still pretty tough, and prepare to get flipped constantly, in case you didn't know what a robot like Toro was all about. But once you beat him, you get your 4th giant nut. There's not much that goes on after you beat it besides the imagery of a golden nut every time you beat a weight class, but at least it unlocks new arenas. There's a second mode in this game called Brawl Mode, where you basically can choose any robot, including the 16 robots from the series that are in this game, and fight 1 to 3 opponents in the arena of your choosing. Now there's 5 arenas, the battle box and one that comes with each weight class. Box, as I mentioned before, is just classic and it's great to play in. That's always my choice. But let's get into the other ones just for the heck of it. You have the oil rig to start, which has hazards similar to the battle box, but there's also flamethrowers and a trapdoor on the side you can fall into. There's also these annoying hooks that can scoop you up, but they're pretty easy to avoid. They're not too bad in this one. The next stage is the airplane graveyard. Now this stage is horrendous. I hate it, sorry to say. There's a turbine that sucks you in and just bounces you around in it for a few seconds if you get anywhere near it. Not to mention there's this annoying magnet, which is like the hook but a million times worse. Now next up is the volcano, which it's harmless. It has some basic hazards and a spinning bumper that hits you around in the middle. The pits are present, but they didn't bug me as much in this one. The machine plant is the last one, and this one's okay. The conveyor belts are kind of a pain. They push you into toxic waste, but it's pretty simple otherwise. Basically, one of each of these levels gets unlocked as you get to each weight class. So when you get to beat the super heavyweight weight class, you have all 5 stages to go with. The coolest part about Brawl Mode is the fact that you can play as the robots from the show. Getting to drive Toro or Biohazard is just the coolest, and it really showcases some of the handicaps the robots have, like how hard spinners are to drive and how complicated a robot like Tazbot is to work. The mechanics don't work exactly how you'd imagine for some of the robots, like for example, complete control and Jaws of Death don't function as grabbers, but more so as just damage-dealing weapons that you have to hit with repeatedly. Generally, the hammers and similar weapons don't seem to do that much damage unless you spam them big time. The spinning discs do. Something you'll have to use a lot in tournament mode. Because if you lose a battle, you have to fix up your robot and go at it again. And judges' decisions are honestly really dicey. Like, there's literally no way I lost that battle. The judges in this game are even worse than the Season 2 of the ABC reboot, where even if your weapon broke and you dominated the fight, you still somehow lost. Now this game is definitely worth playing if you're a big Battlebots fan. Is it shovelware? Yeah, pretty much, but shovelware games don't necessarily have to be 100% garbage games. I mean, it might be nostalgia talking, but I honestly think this one's pretty fun. It's shallow, but it's fun. Not to mention, it's a fun game to speedrun in my opinion. Yeah, check that out. Now that I've taken a look at all portable robot combat titles, I think between the 2 series, I'd say that the better one of the 2 is definitely Battlebots, but I think both of them definitely bring something to the table that is worthwhile. Like, sure, a game like Metal Mayhem is really primitive, but, you know, it's a Game Boy Color game, that's kind of to be expected. But if you're a fan of robot combat, you're definitely worth checking out. You will have to import Advanced Destruction and Metal Mayhem, but even at that, all the games will cost you like a few dollars. Except maybe Extreme Destruction, which might run you up to like 15, because it seems to be a little rare. But, you know, they're at least impressive to look at. And Robot Wars, I definitely hope that you come back on here, because they made a huge mistake by canceling you. And Battlebots, I'm really excited to see the display on the Discovery Channel, which starts on Friday, which is really exciting. Maybe I should do videos talking about the upcoming Battlebots episodes. Is that something you'd be into? Let me know in the comments down below. Anyways, I really appreciate that you all watch this, and I also do streaming on Twitch. There's a link down below in the description, and as well as a link to my Discord channel, so, you know, check them out if you're into that. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe and like if you were into it, and have a fantastic day.